Rwanda, one of Africa's smallest nations. Known as the land of 1,000 hills. For 3 months in 1994, Rwanda experienced genocide. Years have gone by, but the country remains scarred. Here, one man has found his father's body and will finally be able to provide a proper burial. Canadian General Romeo Dalliare witnessed the genocide as commander of a small UN peacekeeping force stationed in Rwanda. In June 2002, he spoke at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum about how the genocide might have been prevented and about his own struggle with the memory of failing to do so.
You can't just say, well, it's 8 years ago or 9 years ago and you did what you could. Did I do everything I could? Did I have all the tools?
On April 6, 1994, Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was assassinated when a missile shot down his plane. Extremist leaders of the country's Hutu majority took the assassination as the signal to launch their carefully planned campaign of extermination against leading Hutu moderates and the country's entire Tutsi minority. The extremists seized control of the government. Tutsi of all ages were left without refuge. They were hunted down and killed in their homes, at roadblocks, in schools, in churches. In 100 days, as many as 800,000 people, including 3 out of every 4 Tutsi in Rwanda, were murdered.
You can't imagine the smell, the sound of dogs eating humans throughout the night, howling by the hundreds, of seeing children living amongst the corpses of their families, because there's nowhere else to go and there's no orphanage and nobody could pick them up at the time.
In the middle of this horror were General Dalliare and the poorly equipped UN force sent to keep a peace that the extremists had suddenly, violently shattered.
You have no food, water, fuel, medical supplies, defensive stores, because none of the contracts had been signed 6 months into the mission by the UN staff. Countries had not provided troops with equipment, so you got Bangladeshi troops coming in with not even a pot to be able to cook their food.
3 months before the genocide began, General Dalliare had learned of extremist plans for mass murder and told his UN superiors that he was going to seize an arms cache.
The response was immediate, within hours, that I was not authorized, it was outside my mandate, and that I was jeopardizing the whole mission. Well, on the 6th of April, the war started. Within 24 hours, I had 10 soldiers dead, but already thousands of Rwandans were being slaughtered.
After the killing started, General Dalliare requested more forces to stop the murders.
Within the first few days of the Rwandan war and genocide, Kofi Annan went to all 69 countries. Not one of them provided one soldier.
Although no nation would send troops to help the Rwandans, Western soldiers did arrive to evacuate Westerners.
And so all the expatriates, within 5 days, picked up what they had, left the Rwandans who had served them for years, decades, who raised their kids, left them to be slaughtered behind, and went back to Brussels and Paris and all these other places.
The world turned its back on Rwanda. 2 weeks into the genocide, the UN Security Council voted to reduce Dallaire's force to a token level. The killing continued for weeks. 100 days after it began, the genocide ended when a Tutsi-led rebel force, the Rwanda Patriotic Front, drove the genocidal government out of the country. General Dalliare left Rwanda in August 1994. He still struggles with the memory of what he witnessed.
You just can't walk through all that blood and all that gore and all that sound. Did I or should I have walked up to Kofi Annan or Boutros Ghali and throw my commission in front of him and say, to hell with you, nobody's coming, so I'm going? Should I have commenced opening fire? The first morning, it was made very clear to me that if I opened fire, I would become the third belligerent, because then it's open season. But with the force I had, there was no way that I could open fire and guarantee the security of my force. I didn't have enough ammunition to be able to hold out in a firefight for more than half an hour. No, there is no conceivable way of actually being able to walk away from the immensity of what it is. And imagine the moral dilemmas we had of all those people calling that morning, screaming at the end of the phone for me to send troops to get them, and hearing the people smashing down the door and shooting them at the end of the phone, or deciding which ones I could go and rescue and which ones I couldn't go rescue. Of the moral dilemma of the soldier who's all of a sudden seeing a crowd encouraging a girl of 14, 15 with a machete and a child on her back to kill another girl of 14, 15 with a child on her back. What do my soldiers do? They're held up at the entrance of a village, and they see these hundreds of people edging on this girl to kill another one. Do my soldiers open fire into the crowd, killing God knows how many and injuring, to go save that girl? Does the corporal, who's 19, 20, 21, coming out of our same schools, does that corporal take his sniper and orders him to shoot the girl with the machete, probably killing her child? Does the corporal simply walk away with his guys? What's the answer? What is the answer? What will he be held accountable morally, and what will he be held accountable technically? If he had to open fire, he went directly against the mandate, and God knows what the reaction was. He didn't open fire. He negotiated and negotiated, and as he's negotiating, this girl was being chopped up and her child was chopped up. And the crowd roared. And it was finished. That corporal of 21 came back home. And back home, we had Nightline, and we had hockey, and we had everything else. The country's not at war. There's no war. Rwanda didn't affect our security. They went there because there was a belief that there were humans who needed help, and found themselves totally incapable of providing that help. And they come back with this new generation of injury called post-traumatic stress syndrome that in fact affects the brain, because those moral dilemmas not being solved remain. And that's what we lived. Imagine what the Rwandans lived. I sent a section of 2 vehicles to a house where we suspected there were people there that needed to be pulled out. They didn't find them. So they came back, and the next day I said, go check just in case. The next day they went, and the whole family was slaughtered on the floor. They didn't find them because the family wasn't sure whether or not they were UN or simply people dressed up and using the UN, so they hid in the ceiling. The militia saw the troops going to that house, and so they tore the place apart and slaughtered them. Sometimes you were wondering whether going to help them was putting them in danger. This is not 4 or 5 people on a block. This is thousands upon weeks and weeks and weeks. And the Western world sat there. You got to start wondering about the depth of your belief in the moral values, the ethical values, and your belief in humanity. All humans are human. There are no humans more human than others. That's it.